The men that I meet, and I'm dating, I'm single, but I'm dating, the men that I meet, they ain't perfect, but the conversation is more of a dialogue like this, Nick. I have literally yet, knock on wood, because I don't want to, yelled or raised my voice at a man in the past 3 years I've been dating.
What would be your advice or your insight to, I mean, because you are a single woman as well, and is the desire to get married eventually?
It is. I'm in my choosing. I said 4 or 5 months ago, I said, okay, God, I'm in my choosing stage. I'm not going to call up another wedding, because the commitment in me is different.
So and you, like you said, you've had plans that did not go as plan.
I've called off 2 engagements and 2 weddings, and
2 separate times. So that's 4.
2 separate times.
Damn.
Yeah, 2 separate times.
All right. So so you know what you want. You gonna get what you want when you want it. What is your insight and advice to finding this husband out there?
So take your time and do you, and don't personalize it, because you have a lot of people who already been married a few times. That could easily be you. You know, I always say I'm hybrid, meaning I'm alpha submissive, because I'm definitely alpha, but I'm definitely submissive. And I couldn't be with a man that I couldn't be submissive with. Like if my alpha is always in prone with you, then I like submitting. I like loving on you.
You hit exactly where I want to go. So in this, because even in the way you conduct yourself, even the intellect and the wisdom that you possess, it comes off very alpha and probably is intimidating to a lot of men. And then so either you find yourself being combative with another alpha, or you find yourself overtaking a man that can't match that energy.
When I first heard of Dr. Chyenne Bryant, it was from the Cam Newton show, just like many other people, and I was curious about who is this black woman checking a black man on his show. And then I thought it was interesting and she was interesting, so I went over and watched the Nick Cannon interview, and again I thought, who is this black woman checking black men on their own shows? And so I kind of looked a little bit more into her, but I want to particularly in this video focus on the video that she did with Nick Cannon, because I think although what she said to both Cam Newton and Nick Cannon was in many ways warranted, as far as her critiques and criticisms of them, you know, having kids with multiple women, and that is not something I condone. This to me is also a situation of who is going to coach the coach. And so she is a relationship coach with no relationship, and we all know that that does happen, and there are, you know, a lot of coaches who necessarily don't have a relationship. But for me, when a person, a coach, a relationship coach, doesn't have a relationship, I'm usually looking for like why don't they have a relationship? And so doing a deeper dive into her story, it turns out that she was actually engaged 4 times, and she said about 3 of those times she knew that those men were not for her. So I have questions about how the relationship even got to the point of her accepting a ring. And this is not about shaming, but I want us to have an honest conversation, because I think that if on the surface you listen to Dr. Cheyenne, I'll call her Dr. Bryant, she sounds like somebody you should totally follow her advice. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I think you do need to take it with a grain of salt, because I'm going to be unpacking some things that she said that I have some critiques about, and I do realize that a lot of black women follow her. So I always say keep that same energy, like the same energy that you give to getting your college degree, getting your PhD, getting that corporate job, the same energy you give to the girls' trips, getting your nails done, your hair done, all that. Like, keep that same energy when it comes to a romantic relationship. And what you often find is that a lot of black women struggle to maintain that same energy in the area of love. And again, this is not, I mean, I have my own personal story, so this is not about shaming. Some of this comes from personal experience. But when Cheyenne was talking, Dr. Bryant, I kept thinking about, well, who is going to coach the coach? Because although she is checking Cam Newton and checking Nick Cannon, and perhaps rightfully so, she herself, it to me seems like she could use a little bit of coaching. The other piece to this also has to do with her demeanor. And so one of the things she talked about in this interview is her past relationships with men and her being an alpha female, what she called it, or being more like an alpha female. And, you know, she talks about being kind of like alpha, what I call alpha submissive. Her thing about being an alpha female is that she's learned how to tame her alpha and control it and reel it in. And I'm not saying that she's wrong, but I wonder, you know, it's always interesting when I hear women say this, because I follow a woman, her name is Suzanne Vanker, and she self-identifies as an alpha woman. She's been married for about 20 or 30 years. And so it's always interesting when I hear women say that they're alpha females or alpha women when they have results, like being married for 30 years, versus when they don't, right? And I think Dr. Cheyenne, from what I can recall, talked about being single for 4 years, which is no problem, but also somewhat in the same breath talking about, you know, wanting to have children and being, you know, 41 and you know, taking her time, but then also saying she wanted to have children. Now, the thing about this is you have to be careful when you hear women say, oh, just take your time, don't rush into just anything and anybody. On the one hand, that's true. But on the other hand, if you're 41 and you want biological children, then that is not exactly true. Like, there does need to be a sense of urgency if you want, you know, biological children. Now, another thing that a lot of women will omit is egg freezing, because that is something that many modern women are doing. And a lot of times women will freeze their eggs so that they can take their time. And so it can be misleading as a woman in your 40s listening to Dr. Bryant, and you're like, oh, well, Dr. Bryant said I can take my time because she's taking her time, not realizing that perhaps Dr. Bryant has the means to freeze her eggs. So I did notice that she said that, and it was like, I don't know if I really agree with this. Oh, just take your time. Yeah. So in your early 40s, if you want biological children, the quote old-fashioned way, then taking your time may not necessarily be the best course of action. Again, it doesn't mean just get with anybody, but it does mean you need to keep that same energy. Same energy, like I said, that you took to get your PhD, you might want to put into your dating life and ultimately leading to who you want to marry. She talked about yelling at, so she talked about the men that she's dated, the 4 guys that she was engaged to, being amazing men, right? She said there was no abuse. You know, she really spoke highly of these men, but then also talked about how I think a couple of them she would yell at and become very alpha female or alpha woman like with these men. I found this interesting because, you know, you could say, well, of course, I don't know the situation. Maybe these men were yelling at her. You know, I don't know the circumstances that would cause her to yell, but I think it's just being mindful that of the ways in which people contradict themselves. Because if you're saying these men were so amazing, and she did admit that why the relationships failed was on her, but when you're also talking about being alpha female and learning how to tame it, and then also saying that, you know, you were pretty aggressive in the past with men. The question that I still have, because I don't identify as an alpha female at all. In fact, I don't typically get along too well with women who identify as alpha females. And like, I can be cordial with women like that, but those type of women I typically don't get close to. And that's a whole nother video. So I can't speak to this from a standpoint as far as like being an alpha female myself. One of the things women talk about is like being able to cut it off, like cut off the alpha. And I guess what I wonder is, can it really be turned, like if you're really alpha, can it be turned off? And now when I think about Suzanne Vanker, who by the way is a white woman, she's I believe she identifies as an anti-feminist, and I've actually featured some of her opinions on my channel before, and I'll be featuring her again because I love her work. But I believe Suzanne Vanker does talk about sort of turning it on and off, right? But or maybe not her, maybe not Suzanne Vanker, but some of the women she interviews, they talk about turning on, you know, like when you go to work, you're in alpha female mode, and then, you know, when you come home, you shut it off. You know, I think this can work for some women, but not all. I think a lot of women struggle with turning it on and off. And I'm at the point where I wonder, is that even realistic? This idea that alpha-ness is something you turn off and femininity is something you turn on. Like, I just don't really live like that. Like, I'm just kind of who I am all the time. And, you know, but I don't know. I mean, again, like I said, that's another video, but that's somewhat of a red flag I picked up. And again, if she is coaching you, right? Because keep in mind, I am a coach. So I'm also going to gravitate to other women, especially other black women who are coaches. And so I was, again, very impressed by her interview with Cam Newton and with Nick Cannon in terms of how she was coaching them and them allowing her to check them on their show. I was like, whoa, this is interesting. But I'm going to personally prefer that my coach has some level of lived experience or expertise in what they're coaching me on. And so if they're coaching me on a relationship, but yet they're like, oh, I'm an alpha female who used to yell at men, you know, that's gonna probably stand out to me and maybe, you know, make me back up a little bit as far as receiving their coaching. It doesn't mean that they're not intelligent and educated and can help me in other ways, but it's just helping me with my relationship. And this video is getting very long. I'm actually on my way to work out outside. As you guys know, I like being outside. So I'm about to try to work out here before it gets dark. So that's why I look this way and whatever. But I wanted to make this video quickly. Theory versus practice. And I've talked about this before. I think a lot of women, modern black women, it's easy to talk in theory. And I heard when she was speaking, there was a lot of theory. But when she got to the practice and her lived experience, the substance was lacking. And so again, I think, like, if someone was coaching me, I would want them to minimize the theory and come heavy on, like, the practice. Like, oh, this, you know, the lived experiences, what they learned. And it sounds like, again, because of her 4 failed engagements, or, you know, I guess you can call it 4 failed engagements. Not that she didn't learn anything, but again, if you're coaching someone in a relationship, it's like, you know, and you're so good about knowing how to theorize, but perhaps not as good at getting to the meat and potatoes of what people really want to know. Is like, what does the work really look like? What is this work that everybody keeps talking about that I need to do to maintain a relationship, a successful one? And so again, I like I said, lots of theory put out there, not as much practice. This is another curated legacy production, and I am here to make the invisible visible about modern black women. I highlight the things that black women didn't tell you about. So like, share, and subscribe. Click the links in the description box to learn more about my business, Curated Legacy LLC, and my coaching and consulting service. Join the Black and Invisible YouTube membership group and purchase my book on Amazon about being an invisible black woman. And as always, stay tuned for more videos.